Hey guys, I'm Dimitri with Hardware Canucks and welcome to another video review. XFX has gained a reputation for its hardware, and like EVGA is branching out into other categories. So today we're looking at their very first chassis. This is the Bravo Type 01, and it is released at an ambitious price of $130. Now I say ambitious because there are a ton of excellent and already established cases within that price range. So let's find out how XFX did on their very first case. And I want to start off with the size. XFX is labeling this as a mid-tower, but because the plastic exterior bits, the case turns out to be actually quite large. And here it is next to our office full tower, so I would certainly put the Bravo case in the same category. Design-wise, XFX is slapping branding all over the place with a cool-looking aluminum piece that displays the model, and I can actually see this becoming sort of a staple for their future cases. Just maybe use some stronger glue next time. The case is elevated with rubberized feet, and they are going for that floating look, allowing decent enough space at the bottom for adequate airflow, which is totally fine. But there is 2 full inches that makes this case unnecessarily tall, plus all the plastics at the top that house all the ports, and actually quite convenient to carry the case around. All of the connections are placed at the top with audio jacks and 4 USB ports, 2 of which are USB 3. And right away, because of the layout, it's not the most convenient, especially for ports going inward like that, so chassis placement may be limited. Power and reset buttons are very discreet at the front, along with 3 hidden 5¼ drive bays. Now, removing the front panel, we find a detachable dust filter and an included 200mm intake that could also be swapped for dual 120mm fans. The fan included here is a little bit surprising, as its thin profile makes it quiet but questionable in terms of CFM performance. Also, it is heavily restricted by the drive cage inside that is non-removable. Nothing unusual at the rear. We get a 140mm exhaust fan, 8 PCI slots, water cooling grommets, and a large dual dust filter at the bottom. At the top, we also find some ventilation that continues in a very uniform style on both sides of Bravo, which are not dust-proof, so that's really unfortunate. The top houses a single 120 or 140mm fan that must be installed from the inside with the screws provided. Now, I'm a little bit surprised XFX omitted dual fan mounting options here, considering how popular all-in-one 240mm water coolers are becoming. You'd think for a 2014 chassis, this would be taken into account. It's the same story for the side ventilation. We get a really cool uniform look, and each panel has the aluminum red plate showcasing the model number and the mounting holes for triple 120mm fans. The side panel is actually 2 pieces, a large plastic cover and metal side panel underneath, and that's because the alpha version of the case will feature aluminum panels and perhaps allow XFX to reuse the internal frame with some new and perhaps updated exterior design. And with both panels off, let's check to see how XFX did with the internal layout. First, we have toolless mechanisms for your optical drive cage, followed by an array of 8 drive caddies with SSD support in the middle, and the drive cage is partially modular, allowing you to turn this into a dedicated 2.5-inch drive cage with additional 5 SSD brackets included. Now, we've seen this design to work really well for compact enclosures, but given how large the case is, I find it totally unfitting. For example, there is already 12 inches of clearance with the cage wall in the standard position that expands to 13.5 inches with the SSD cage, plus the incredibly restrictive front airflow caused by the frame. Now, it's nice for XFX to realize user flexibility is important, but an actual drive cage that is totally removable to allow better airflow would be more fitting in the Bravo. The power supply sits on stick-on rubber feet, plus we get 120 and 140mm fan mount at the bottom, clearance of which would be determined by the length of your power supply. Turning the case around, the CPU cutout is way too small for 2014 standards, and I would love to see that enlarged. However, we do get many cable tie mounts scattered all over, plus these strange rubber grommets that fit with the case design. There isn't that much clearance at the back, enough for all your cables to work, but not enough for those side panel fans. And starting with the assembly, the large internals and excellent cable cutouts around the motherboard make rounding really easy. Additional cutouts underneath the motherboard are always helpful, plus the 4 large openings on the side of the motherboard are excellent. There is just over 2 inches of clearance between the top panel and our memory modules, and it's just really unfortunate we don't have any dual fan placements for a potential radiator. And turning the case around, cable management is quite simple, there's plenty of room, but what about additional SSD brackets or fan hubs? These are all the features that we're seeing more and more of, and XFX really need to take note as this is just not up to 2014 standards. But having said that, the case has a few good attributes like unique aesthetics, flexible drive cage system, and a pretty seamless assembly routing process. But I gotta say I'm slightly disappointed at the lack of features for a 2014 case, as the Bravo Type 1 doesn't really bring anything new to the market. There's a huge loss in airflow potential, both at the front and the top, due to the drive cage system that is extremely restrictive, and the lack of dual fan support at the top gets rid of any internal water cooling options. There are no dust filters either on the side or the top, and placement of USB and audio ports is really limiting. There's just so many things XFX could have done differently, and at this price point it is hard to justify the list of negatives, especially since it misses on key functionality points like internal water cooling and unique features. I want to say it's a good first attempt from XFX, but given the incredibly competitive nature of the enclosure market today, we need to see more focus on functionality and uniqueness. So guys, let's give them some critical feedback, and you let us know in the comments below what features you'd want to see incorporated into their next design. As always, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.